Our next guest is poet and bookseller Beau Beausoleil. In response to the March 5, 2007 bombing of Al-Mutanabbi Street in Baghdad, Beau called the artist community together in an effort to preserve the cultural and artistic legacy of Al-Mutanabbi Street. Mr. Beausoleil is co-editor of the anthology Al-Mutanabbi Street Starts Here. Poets and writers respond to the March 5, 2007 bombing of Baghdad's Street of Booksellers. And now, part 1 of our interview, to be concluded next week with part 2. Beau, thank you for joining us today at the Arabic Hour. It's great to have you here.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
So now the bombing of Al-Mutanabbi Street, that served as catalyst for the compilation of your anthology and for the book art and your other art projects. But what's your connection, and even before the bombing, to the street and to Iraq?
Well, like so many others, millions of others really, I marched against the invasion, and there is this whole thing about marching and then going to the rally and then going home. And once you go home, that feeling of helplessness in the face of this, what seems so inevitable, that this war is going to start, and the incredible frustration that you feel. Likewise, the idea that every morning I would look at the newspaper and read of all the carnage and the suffering that the Iraqis were going through, and the anticipation of this invasion. And the next day, I would open the newspaper and it would begin again. I mean, by 2007, I was, I felt completely just in anguish, but not really able to do anything. And the Iraqi people, because of the media, were these people who were portrayed as being like me, but not really like me, not quite with the same values that I had. Until the bombing on Al-Mutanabbi Street in March of 2007. And when that street was attacked, and more than 30 people were killed, more than 100 were wounded, I knew immediately that as a bookseller, which I am in San Francisco, that my bookstore would have been on that street. And as a poet, that would have been my cultural community that had been attacked. And that distance, that forced distance between myself and the Iraqi people dropped away. And I knew that I was no different than any Iraqi in that situation. And I also knew that there had to be a response from my own cultural community to a tragedy like this, to the idea of someone attacking a cultural space. And I knew that there was a long historical record of regimes and people who wanted power, of attacking cultural spaces, attacking artists and writers and books. And then I, like so many other people who become organizers, I waited for someone else to do something. And I waited a day, I waited 2 days, I waited a week. I thought to myself, surely someone in my own community of writers and artists in San Francisco would put together a memorial reading. And it did not happen. And every day that page continued to turn. Finally, after about 10 days, I just, I couldn't stand it anymore, and I decided I will do this, even though I had never organized anything on a large scale. I began to call writers and poets, and I contacted various venues to try and find a space to do a reading. And we got a space at the San Francisco Library. And at the same time, I issued a call for letterpress printers to do broadsides, one large sheet, usually with a poem on it, as a personal response to this attack on Al-Mutanabbi Street. Letterpress printers, to me, have always been historically first responders. They are the people throughout the history of printing when there is a moment of collective grief or aspirations for a more just society, dating back to our own Constitution or Declaration of Independence. It was letterpress printers. That's what was being done, was letterpress printing. And those sheets could be put up on the side of a building or the side of a tree to bring people together. And I wanted that again. I wanted that kind of engagement by letterpress printers. I wanted something large and physical that people would encounter. So we had the reading, and we had more than 43 letterpress printers sent in work in just a few weeks. And then we had 2 shows of the broadsides. But at the end of it, I knew I did not want to stop. I knew that not continuing this was participating in the same idea of turning the page, the same idea that we had done something and now we are absolved of everything. And now we can move on, quote unquote. And I felt that was completely wrong. You know, one of the things that I feel about art, really art that works, is that I feel like there is this constant noise that runs across our body. And in urban situations, that can be all the media, all the traffic, all the advertising. And one thing that art can do is to completely silence that noise and let you hear your own life. And I like to see this project in that way, that people who come to see our exhibits or come to hear us read have a moment when they begin to hear their own life. And once they do that, that is a first step to beginning to see themselves on Al-Mutanabbi Street, beginning to see that that street, which has existed historically way before our own country ever even existed and has always stood for the free exchange of ideas, was a place that we could all stand together. So in 2010, after we had had numerous broadside shows here in the United States, in the UK, and a show in the Netherlands and in Ireland, I decided again to continue the project, and with the help of Sarah Bodman, co-coordinator, who had helped me finish up the broadside project by helping me reach 130 letterpress printers from both Europe and the United States and the UK. We launched an artist book project, and artist books are books created by artists, people who take the text that they're working with, who take the idea that they're working with into a very deep place, a place that is so deep within themselves that their own life can't help but be integrated into their work. And they take that and then bring it from that deep place and into a visual space that we can all share. And we asked from artist book makers 3 books to create 3 of the same books, so we could have 3 sets of books that would travel the country to accompany readings and panels and shows of the broadsides as well. And we have just begun. The Cambridge Arts Council was very, very generous when we approached them, and they gave us 6 months at the Cambridge Arts Council, along with an incredible array of associated events that Jessica Ferguson of our project has helped coordinate. So we're going to travel through the United States, through the UK. There is a show of the artist books, about 185 of them right now. Our goal is 260 artist books, which symbolically is twice the number of people who were killed and injured that day on Al-Mutanabbi Street. And in 2014, we will be at the American University in Cairo to exhibit 100 of those artists' books and 100 of the broadsides. And the university wants to incorporate the framework of the project into their own curriculum, which will lead up to the first exhibit. And I'm really excited about that.
So when the artists first started responding with their contributions, how did they react to the destruction of Al-Mutanabbi Street and of the destruction of the historical significance of that street?
They responded with their heart and soul. I mean, we created a sort of a database of Middle Eastern and North African writers that they could choose a poem from and then work with that to create a broadside from it. We asked for 15 copies of the broadsides. In the beginning, we sold copies at some of the exhibits, and all the money that the project has ever raised has gone to Doctors Without Borders. Their response was incredibly heartfelt, and many of them have come up to me since and thanked me for giving them the opportunity to do what they do on a daily basis, but be able to direct it to a situation like this. You know, in really repressive situations, historically, printers have been one of the first people that regimes have gone after, you know, to stop the dissemination of ideas. You know, you wreck the printing press. You arrest the printer, you imprison the printer, you kill the printer at the same time as you go after the writers or the artists and be able to create your own lists that you then begin to work off of to eliminate these people, either drive them from the country or kill them or make them subservient to your own ideas. You know, I always think of the people like the Khmer Rouge that you wanted to use the expression they were creating the year zero. But, you know, part of resistance to any situation that is so oppressive is your own cultural history. I mean, that is part and parcel of who you are, and as long as you continue to express who you are, you can see yourself. When you can no longer see yourself, then you become the victim. You become the other inside your own country. I think that's a really, really important thing, not just to Iraq that this project directly addresses, but here in our own country as well. I mean, we have to have that sense of ourselves as artists and writers. We have to understand the power that is inherent in the art and the writing that we do, and we constantly have to figure out ways to test that power. Otherwise, we become just empty vessels, and the words and the images that we make are there, but they're empty because they're not invested with our own cultural history, with our own understanding of what's going on in our own country.
Was it important for you when you were reaching out to the artists, was it important for you to have artists from different walks of life, from different countries, all responding to the same shocking event?
Well, one of the things that we did was to issue what is called an open call, because we didn't want to have people submit work and then we would judge it. We wanted the people who responded. And, you know, always there is some work that is incredibly powerful, some work that is not quite as powerful, but together they form an amazing and powerful voice. And that's what this project is about. It's not about one book, one artist. It is about a group of books and artists and printers and writers and poets and visual artists all speaking together. You know, so that was one thing that was really important to me, was to make this into a project that embraced everyone. And in terms of involving, you know, if we were setting out to try and get lots of visual artists and printers from the Middle East and North Africa. My feeling has been, as the project has evolved, is that, for me personally, with our shared history with Iraq, I wouldn't even expect an Iraqi artist at this point to want to work with us.
Why not?
Because I feel they have, the right to say, you can't speak for us until I can speak for myself. And I see this project as a way for people in the West to begin to clear a space. And into that space we will step, and we will provide a way that validates the Iraqi cultural community when it begins to speak to us directly in the West about what has happened in their country. One of the things that I've emphasized in this project is that it's not an anti-war project, because I felt like to declare something like that, we would be too easily brushed aside. And I have said that it is not a healing project, because the wounds that we have left on Iraq, both literally and metaphorically, are so vast that it will take literally years for us to understand what we have left behind in Iraq. So at this point in the project, I really feel like this is a moment for people in the West to see the commonality between a street like Al-Mutanabbi Street and any cultural street right here. The street that runs in front of the Arab Cultural Center, the street that runs in front of the Cambridge Arts Council. That's where Al-Mutanabbi Street starts. Anywhere where someone sits down and begins to write towards the truth, anywhere where someone picks up a book to read, that's where Al-Mutanabbi Street starts. And it can start in Cambridge, in Boston, in San Francisco, in Omaha or Detroit or New York. It can start on a street in Damascus or Aleppo. It can start on a street in Beijing or Tehran. All of those places hold artists and writers that want to write towards the truth. And we honor all of those people, this project does, and feels that there's room on Al-Mutanabbi Street for all of us to stand together.
So, Beau, this book actually is the anthology with the name Al-Mutanabbi Street Starts Here. Can you tell us a little bit about who contributed to the anthology and about some of the work that's in the book?
Sure. It's a wonderful mixture of both prose and poetry. Many Iraqi writers, some of the most famous Iraqi writers, historically, as well as Americans, as well as Arab Americans, writers from North Africa and the Middle East. We worked with 17 different contributing editors. Mason Pachachi was one of the contributing editors, and she brought in people like Rhea C., who was part of the Open Shutters project, and Irada Jabouri, who wrote an incredible piece on Al-Mutanabbi Street and how she used to visit it with her father. But the whole texture of the street is there, the whole pain of the time, all going all the way back to the war with Iran, to the sanctions, and finally to and the Gulf War and the invasion. I mean, she compresses that all in there in her own emotional feelings and attachment and memory of being with her father. It's an extremely strong piece. So there's an essay in there. I wanted not just poems and essays that were directly about the street. I wanted writers who felt that the street resonated with their own life, who could see Al-Mutanabbi Street in their own writing. So there's an essay by a Chinese American. He's Chinese Burmese, about buying used books in Rangoon on a street not unlike Al-Mutanabbi Street. There's a poem in there from a woman who does work with prisoners at San Quentin, and how she feels that Al-Mutanabbi Street starts right there at the door of a cell where a prisoner is writing or reading.
That was Beau Beausoleil, co-editor of the anthology Al-Mutanabbi Street Starts Here, published by PM Press in 2012. Make sure to join us next week for part 2 and the conclusion of our interview. Stay tuned. We'll be back after this short program ID.
You are watching The Arabic Hour, a program of news, views, culture, cuisine, and the Arab American experience. To view today's program or any previous programs, log on to our website at www.arabichour.org.
Thank you so much for joining us. Some stations will be leaving us, and we look forward to seeing you next week. For those of you staying with us for the remainder of the hour, we hope you enjoy the last musical segment following the closing credits. On behalf of all of the volunteers here at the Arabic Hour, this is Ghanwa Hakim, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
The Arabic Hour has been brought to you in part by the William G. Abdullah Memorial Library, a resource center for information and education on the Arab American experience. The American Arabic Benevolent Association, ABA, an umbrella association for community endeavors. The Nicholas G. Barham Veterans Association and Ladies Auxiliary, providing veteran services, scholarships with community pride. And by our members as well as contributions from viewers like you. you.